The homeless encampment under the Interstate 90 overpass in Seattle had been there for 8 months, growing slowly as the housing crisis deepened. Most people drove past without a second glance. The blue tarps and makeshift shelters just another part of the urban landscape they'd learned to ignore. But for 72-year-old Elias Waterford, that encampment had become home after a series of devastating losses left him with nothing. Elias had once been a respected veterinarian with his own practice in Bellevue. He'd spent 40 years caring for animals, building a reputation as the doctor who never turned away a pet in need, regardless of the owner's ability to pay. His kindness had been his greatest strength and, ultimately, his downfall. When his business partner, a man named Marcus Hollis, whom Elias had trusted like a brother, systematically embezzled funds over 3 years, the practice went bankrupt. The investigation revealed that Marcus had been gambling heavily, using the clinic's accounts as his personal bank. Elias lost everything in the aftermath. His practice closed. His savings were drained in legal fees trying to recover stolen funds. His wife of 45 years, unable to handle the stress and public shame, filed for divorce and moved across the country to live with their daughter. Within 6 months, Elias went from a comfortable middle-class life to sleeping in a tent under a freeway overpass. But Elias's story intersected with another tragedy that had been unfolding in the shadows of Seattle's infrastructure. For 6 weeks, someone had been using the areas around homeless encampments as dumping grounds for unwanted animals. The perpetrator calculated that homeless people couldn't report crimes effectively, that animals left in these areas would disappear into the general chaos of street life, and that authorities wouldn't investigate thoroughly even if complaints were made. On February 3rd, during one of Seattle's rare winter storms that brought actual snow to the city, someone abandoned a mother dog and her 4 newborn puppies near Elias's section of the encampment. They'd been placed in a cardboard box and left beside a dumpster, presumably to freeze or starve. The person who did this had no way of knowing that a former veterinarian was sleeping 30 feet away. What made the situation even more complex was that the K-9 unit of the Seattle Police Department had recently begun conducting welfare checks around the encampment following a series of assaults on homeless individuals. Officer Dawson Water and his K-9 partner, a Belgian Malinois named Judge, were assigned to these patrols. Dawson had a reputation in the department for actually caring about the homeless population, which made him either a saint or a fool depending on who you asked. When Judge caught the scent of the abandoned animals during a routine patrol and led Dawson to the box, neither officer nor dog expected to find an elderly man already working to save the puppies' lives. They certainly didn't expect that man to be a former veterinarian. And nobody could have predicted that this chance meeting would expose a network of illegal breeding operations, uncover a conspiracy involving animal control officers who'd been paid to look the other way, and reveal that Marcus Hollis, the partner who destroyed Elias's life, was now running the largest puppy mill operation in the Pacific Northwest. The cardboard box was disintegrating in the snow, the bottom already soaked through and collapsing. Elias Waterford's arthritic fingers worked frantically to transfer 4 tiny puppies from the failing container to the inside of his coat. The mother dog, a scruffy mixed breed that looked part golden retriever, part something else, watched his every movement with exhausted eyes. She was too weak to stand, her body curled in the protective C-shape that nursing mothers instinctively took. "I've got you," Elias whispered, his breath creating clouds in the frigid air. Snow was falling steadily now, unusual for Seattle, coating everything in white. The puppies couldn't have been more than 3 days old. Eyes still closed, cord stumps still fresh, completely dependent. Without intervention, they had maybe an hour before hypothermia killed them. Maybe less. Elias's tent was 15 feet away. A blue tarp stretched over a frame made from shopping carts and salvaged PVC pipe. It wasn't much, but it blocked the wind and held what little heat his body and a propane camping stove could generate. He needed to get the dogs inside immediately. The mother dog tried to follow as he gathered her babies, but her legs gave out. She collapsed back into the snow with a whimper that cut straight through Elias's chest. "One trip," he told her. tucking the puppies deeper into his coat where they'd have his body heat. "I'll come right back for you. I promise." He'd made a lot of promises in his life. Most of them had been broken, circumstances and betrayals destroying good intentions. But this promise he'd keep even if it killed him. The journey to his tent took less than 30 seconds but felt eternal. His knees screamed with every step, arthritis made worse by cold and damp. Inside the tent, he activated his camping stove, arranged the puppies in his sleeping bag near the heat source. Not too close, just enough warmth, and rushed back out into the snow. The mother dog was exactly where he'd left her, shivering violently now, her body shutting down. First welcoming CTA. Elias dropped to his knees beside her. At 72, with a bad back and worse knees, lifting a 40-pound dog was a challenge even in ideal conditions. In the snow, exhausted and malnourished himself, it should have been impossible. But Elias had spent 40 years as a veterinarian. He'd lifted animals in every conceivable circumstance. Muscle memory took over. He got his arms under her chest and hindquarters, stood with a groan that came from somewhere deep in his bones, and staggered toward his tent. She was lighter than she should have been, severely underweight, nursing 4 puppies while being starved herself. Whoever had abandoned this family hadn't just neglected them, they'd actively abused them first. Elias felt rage mixing with his exhaustion, hot and clarifying. 72 years old, homeless, broken by life, and he still had enough anger left to hate people who hurt defenseless creatures. Inside the tent, he positioned the mother dog beside her puppies. She immediately began licking them, checking each one, her tail giving one weak wag when she confirmed they were all alive. Elias covered them with his only blanket, a scratchy wool thing he'd gotten from a shelter donation box, and started assessing the mother's condition. Dehydrated, malnourished, mammary glands infected. She needed antibiotics for fluids, proper nutrition. Things Elias no longer had access to. The sound of boots crunching in snow made him look up. Through the gap in his tent flap, he saw a German Shepherd, no Belgian Malinois, his veterinarian brain automatically corrected, sniffing around the area where he'd found the box. Behind the dog came a police officer, young, maybe 30, with the kind of face that hadn't been completely hardened by the job yet. Elias's first instinct was to hide. Police and homeless people had a complicated relationship, and he'd learned to make himself invisible during patrols. But the dog had already caught his scent. The Malinois' head swung toward the tent, ears forward, body alert. The officer followed his partner's gaze. "Seattle PD," the officer called out. "Is someone in there?" Elias sat very still, the mother dog pressed against his side, her puppies making small mewling sounds. The officer moved closer. "Sir, I'm Officer Waterstreet. I'm conducting a welfare check. Are you all right?" The tent flap opened before Elias could respond. Officer Waterstreet, young, clean-cut, with eyes that actually seemed to see Elias as a person rather than a problem, looked inside. His gaze took in the scene. Elderly homeless man, mother dog, for puppies, camping stove creating a circle of warmth in an otherwise freezing space. The officer's expression shifted from caution to confusion to something that might have been respect. "Judge found the box," the officer said quietly, more to himself than to Elias. "You pulled them out of there?" Elias nodded. They were freezing. The mother couldn't stand. Puppies are maybe 3 days old, haven't opened their eyes yet. She's malnourished, probably has mastitis, needs medical attention immediately or she won't survive to nurse them. He delivered the assessment in the clinical tone of his former profession, 40 years of training surfacing despite everything he'd lost. Officer Waterstreet's eyebrows rose. "That's specific." "I was a veterinarian," Elias said. "Before." The word hung between them, carrying the weight of everything that had changed. Before the embezzlement, before the bankruptcy, before his wife left, before he became invisible to the world. The officer's radio crackled. He ignored it, kneeling at the tent entrance so he was eye level with Elias. "Judge!" he called. The Malinois immediately moved to his side, disciplined and alert. "Check them out, boy. Gentle." The dog approached the mother and puppies carefully, sniffing, assessing. The mother dog's hackles rose slightly, but she didn't growl or snap. She was too weak for aggression and perhaps smart enough to recognize these newcomers weren't threats. Judge completed his inspection and returned to his handler, sitting with the perfect posture of a trained police dog. But his attention stayed on the puppies, head tilted slightly, ears tracking every small sound they made. "He likes them," Elias observed. Officer Waterstreet smiled, and it transformed his whole face into something younger. "Judge is a sucker for anything small and helpless. It's actually a problem during training. They have to teach him not to protect the decoy criminals if they look pathetic enough." Despite everything, Elias felt his mouth twitch into something almost like a smile. Then the mother dog shuddered, a full-body tremor that had nothing to do with cold. Elias's hands moved over her abdomen, feeling, checking. His face went pale. "She's hemorrhaging internally. The infection has spread. Without treatment in the next few hours, she'll die and the puppies will die with her." Officer Waterstreet pulled out his phone. "I know a 24-hour emergency vet clinic. They do pro bono work for rescued animals. I'll call them, explain the situation." "They won't take her," Elias interrupted. "Not from me. I'm homeless. I have no money, no ID, no way to prove I'm not just scamming for free services. I've been on the street long enough to know how this works." The officer's jaw tightened. "They'll take her from me. I'm bringing her in as evidence in an animal cruelty case. Which this is, someone abandoned these dogs to die. That's a crime." He was already dialing. Elias watched, wanting to hope but having forgotten how. Hope was a luxury for people who hadn't been betrayed by everyone they trusted. The call was brief. Elias caught phrases: critical condition, nursing puppies, need immediate intervention. When Officer Waterstreet ended the call, he was already reaching for the mother dog. "Clinic's 10 minutes away. They're prepping now. Can you keep the puppies warm until we get back?" "You're coming back?" The question came out more vulnerable than Elias intended. "Someone dumped these dogs near a homeless encampment on one of the coldest nights of the year," Officer Waterstreet said. "That's not random. That's deliberate. Which means whoever did this will probably do it again. I need to investigate, and you're the only witness I've got." He lifted the mother dog carefully, professional and efficient. Judge moved to follow his handler automatically. Elias watched them disappear into the snow, the mother dog cradled in the officer's arms like she mattered, like she was worth saving. The puppies whimpered at the loss of their mother's warmth. Elias gathered them closer, for tiny bodies that fit in his cupped palms, completely helpless and completely dependent on him. "She'll come back," he whispered to them. He promised. Time moved strangely in the tent. Elias cycled through feeding the camping stove, checking the puppy's temperature, keeping them warm against his body. Other residents of the encampment noticed the police presence and gave his tent a wide berth. Nobody wanted to be associated with whatever had drawn law enforcement attention. Elias was alone with 4 newborn puppies and memories of a life where he'd been the one people called for help. An hour passed, then 90 minutes. The puppies were getting restless, making hungry sounds, looking for their mother who wasn't there. Elias's veterinary training gave him enough knowledge to know they were entering critical territory. Newborns needed to nurse every 2 to 3 hours. Without their mother, they'd weaken rapidly. He had no formula, no bottles, no way to feed them properly. The sound of a vehicle pulling up sent Elias's heart racing. Through his tent flap, he saw Officer Waterstreet's patrol car and something else. A second vehicle, unmarked, with 2 people getting out. One was Officer Waterstreet. The other was a woman in scrubs carrying a medical bag. They were bringing the mother dog back. But something was wrong. Elias could see it in the officer's body language, the tense set of his shoulders, the way he scanned the area like he was expecting trouble. Judge was on high alert too, his professional demeanor replaced by something more aggressive. When they reached the tent, Officer Waterstreet spoke quickly, quietly. "We need to move. Right now. There's something bigger happening here." The woman in scrubs, name tag read Dr. Kimura, was already checking the puppies with practiced efficiency. "Mother's stable for now," she said to Elias. "For fluids, antibiotics, she'll need ongoing care, but she'll survive. These little ones are hungry. I brought formula." She pulled supplies from her bag, moving with the speed of someone used to emergency situations. "What's happening?" Elias asked. Officer Waterstreet crouched at the tent entrance, his voice low and urgent. "The dog has a microchip. The vet clinic scanned it. She's registered to a breeding facility in Tacoma that's supposed to be legitimate, licensed, inspected, the works. I called them to report finding her. The person I spoke to claimed she escaped 2 weeks ago. They'd been searching. They're so relieved she's been found." He paused. Then he asked exactly where I found her and who had her. "That's concerning," Dr. Kimura said, while preparing a bottle for the first puppy. "Very. Because if their dog really escaped 2 weeks ago, why wasn't she reported to animal control? Why no social media posts? Why no flyers?" Officer Waterstreet's jaw was tight. "I think someone from that facility dumped her deliberately. And now they know a homeless man and a police officer have evidence of what they did." The words settled over the tent like the falling snow outside, cold and suffocating. Elias had spent months learning the brutal calculus of street survival. Homeless people made perfect victims because nobody cared when they disappeared. Add a police officer who'd made himself a target by investigating, and the math became even more dangerous. "They'll come here," Elias said quietly, "to clean up loose ends." "Not if we're gone when they arrive," Officer Waterstreet replied. He looked at Elias directly, cop to civilian, human to human. "I'm taking you and the dogs into protective custody while I investigate this facility. You'll be safe, fed, and inside until we figure out what's really going on. Protective custody. Safety. Inside." The words sounded like a language Elias had forgotten how to speak. "Why would you do that for me?" "Because you saved 5 lives tonight when you could have walked past that box like everyone else does," the officer said simply. "Because you used to be a veterinarian, which means you took an oath to help animals. Because Judge likes you, and I trust his judgment about people more than my own." The Malinois' tail wagged slightly at hearing his name. His attention split between the puppies and watching the perimeter. Dr. Kimura had the first puppy nursing from a bottle. The tiny thing latched on with desperate hunger. "We need to decide quickly," she said. "If this facility is dirty, they'll move fast. Elias, can you help me feed these babies in a vehicle while we drive?" 40 years of veterinary practice answered before Elias's doubts could. "Yes." They packed in minutes. Sleeping bag, camping stove, Elias's few possessions shoved into a backpack. The mother dog was carried to Officer Waterstreet's patrol vehicle, the puppies bundled in the sleeping bag with Elias and Dr. Kimura. Judge jumped into his compartment, alert and ready. They were pulling away from the encampment when headlights appeared at the other end of the overpass. A van moving slowly, scanning the area. Officer Waterstreet killed his vehicle's lights and took a side route, accelerating into the night. In the back seat, Elias held a newborn puppy that weighed less than a pound, feeding it formula while Dr. Kimura prepared the next bottle. Through the rear window, he watched the van stop where his tent had been. Watched figures get out and search the area. Watched them realize their targets were gone. "That was close," Dr. Kimura whispered. Officer Waterstreet's eyes met Elias's in the rearview mirror. "It's not over. Whoever these people are, they just committed attempted witness intimidation at minimum, possibly conspiracy to commit assault. Which means this is way bigger than one abandoned dog." His phone rang. He answered on speaker. The voice that came through made Elias's entire body go rigid. Smooth, cultured, with a slight accent that Elias hadn't heard in 3 years, but would recognize anywhere. Officer Waterstreet, this is Marcus Hollis, owner of Pacific Northwest Premium Breeders. I understand you found one of my dogs. I'd like to arrange pickup immediately. I'm very concerned about her welfare. Marcus, the partner who'd destroyed Elias's life. The man who'd stolen everything and walked away to build an empire on the bones of Elias's practice. And now, impossibly, he was the owner of the facility that had abandoned these dogs to die. The universe had a cruel sense of symmetry. Officer Waterstreet glanced at Elias in the mirror, seeing the recognition, the shock, the buried rage surfacing. Mr. Hollis, the dog and her puppies are in protective custody as evidence in an ongoing investigation. I'll be in touch regarding your facility's breeding practices and licensing compliance. He ended the call. You know him, Officer Waterstreet said. It wasn't a question. Elias's hands shook as he positioned the second puppy for feeding. He was my business partner. He embezzled from our veterinary practice and destroyed my life. I lost everything because of him. The words came out flat, emotionless, because emotion would break him completely. Dr. Kimura's eyes widened. So this isn't random at all. He's been doing to dogs what he did to you, exploiting, using, discarding when convenient. The assessment was clinical and accurate. Officer Waterstreet pulled into a parking lot behind a commercial building, killed the engine, and turned to face Elias. If your former partner is running an illegal breeding operation and dumping dogs near homeless encampments to cover his tracks, and if he now knows you're alive and involved in exposing him, then you're not just a witness. You're a direct threat to his entire operation. He'll come after me, Elias said quietly. He'll come after all of us, Officer Waterstreet corrected, which is why we're not stopping with protective custody. We're going to take down his entire operation, and you're going to help us do it. The third puppy latched onto its bottle, nursing strongly, fighting for life with the pure determination of something too young to understand death was even possible. Elias looked at the tiny creature, then at the mother dog recovering in the front of the patrol car, then at Dr. Kimura and Officer Waterstreet who'd risked themselves for animals nobody else valued. I don't have anything left to lose, Elias said. Tell me what you need. Officer Waterstreet smiled, and it was the expression of someone who just gained a powerful advantage. Everything you know about Marcus Hollis's business practices, his associates, his methods. And then we're going to pay his facility a surprise inspection visit. Judge barked once from his compartment, sharp and affirming. The dog knew what was coming. They all did. This was going to get dangerous before it got better. But 5 dogs were alive who should have been dead. And sometimes that was worth fighting for, worth risking everything for, worth standing up one more time even when life had knocked you down so many times you'd forgotten how to stand. Elias fed the 4th puppy and began to talk, 40 years of veterinary knowledge combining with 3 years of bitter hindsight to paint a picture of exactly what Marcus Hollis had been building and how to tear it down. Outside, snow continued to fall on a city that walked past suffering every day. But inside the patrol car, a plan was forming that would save more than just 5 abandoned dogs. It would save dozens, maybe hundreds, and give one broken old man a chance at redemption he'd stopped believing was possible. The mother dog opened her eyes and looked at Elias, and in that moment, he understood something he'd forgotten during his months on the street. Value wasn't determined by what you owned or where you slept or whether you'd been betrayed. Value was determined by what you chose to do when someone helpless needed you. And Elias was choosing to fight. The Pacific Northwest Premium Breeders facility occupied 5 acres in Tacoma, all gleaming buildings and professionally landscaped grounds. The website showed happy puppies and testimonials from satisfied customers. The licensing was impeccable. Everything about it screamed legitimacy, which made the reality inside all the more horrific. Officer Waterstreet had called in favors, a lot of favors. By dawn, They had animal control officers, veterinarians from the Humane Society, and detectives from the fraud division converging on the facility. The warrant had been rushed through a sympathetic judge who'd heard enough to understand this was urgent. They were going in with legal authority and enough witnesses that Marcus couldn't make evidence disappear. Elias sat in an unmarked vehicle with Dr. Kimura, watching the operation unfold. He'd given his statement, provided his expertise, mapped out the likely locations where Marcus would keep dogs in substandard conditions hidden from public view. Now all he could do was watch and hope 3 years of planning his revenge from afar was about to pay off. The front entrance opened. Marcus Hollis walked out, confident and smiling, every inch the successful businessman. He'd aged well, expensive suit hiding the moral rot underneath. Elias's hands clenched into fists. Dr. Kimura touched his arm gently. Breathe. Let the system work. The smile disappeared from Marcus's face when he saw the warrant. Disappeared completely when they began searching the facility and finding what Elias had predicted they'd find. Breeding dogs kept in cages too small for them to stand fully. Mothers separated from puppies at 2 weeks instead of 8. Medical neglect. Genetic problems ignored for the sake of profitable breeding. And records, detailed records of dogs that had been dumped rather than properly rehomed when they stopped being profitable. By noon, Marcus Hollis was in handcuffs. By evening, 68 dogs had been removed from the facility and placed in emergency foster care. By the end of the week, the investigation had expanded to uncover a network of similar operations across 3 states, all following the same pattern of presenting legitimate faces while hiding systematic abuse. The mother dog, who they'd named Grace, and her 4 puppies were placed in Elias's care temporarily. Protective Services had found him a transitional housing apartment, a small studio that was warm and dry and had actual walls. Dr. Kimura had hired him as a consultant for the Humane Society, providing expert assessments on the rescued dog's conditions. It wasn't much money, but it was enough. Officer Waterstreet visited weekly, sometimes with Judge, sometimes alone. On one visit, he brought paperwork. The department wants to establish a program where homeless individuals with veterinary or animal care experience can work with rescued animals while getting back on their feet. They're calling it Second Chances for the people and the animals. They want you to help design it. Elias looked at the proposal, at the chance to rebuild something from the ruins of what he'd lost. Why me? Because you proved that value isn't determined by circumstances, Officer Waterstreet said. You saved 5 lives when you had nothing. Imagine what you could do with resources behind you. The puppies, now 3 weeks old, tumbled around Elias's feet, eyes open, starting to play. Grace watched them with the contentment of a mother who knew her babies were safe. Judge lay nearby, having appointed himself their guardian during visits. The sight was absurd and perfect and hopeful in a way Elias had forgotten was possible. I'll do it, Elias said. On one condition. Every animal we save, we document their story. No more invisible suffering. No more victims that don't matter. Every single one gets seen. Officer Waterstreet extended his hand. Deal. They shook on it, 2 people who'd chosen to see what others ignored, to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves, to believe that redemption was possible even when circumstances said otherwise. Outside, Seattle continued its indifferent existence. But inside that small apartment, 5 dogs slept peacefully, and one old man began to remember what it felt like to have purpose. The program launched 3 months later. Over the first year, it helped 17 formerly homeless individuals find stable housing and employment in animal care. It saved over 300 animals from situations of abuse and neglect. And it proved that sometimes the people society threw away were exactly the ones with enough compassion to save others. Elias adopted Grace and all 4 puppies officially. They became his family, the one that couldn't be taken away by embezzlement or betrayal or circumstances beyond his control. Dr. Kimura became a friend, then more than a friend, 2 damaged people finding unexpected connection. Officer Waterstreet and Judge remained constants, checking in, bringing new cases, maintaining the network of care they'd built. Marcus Hollis got 15 years in federal prison. His assets were seized and used to fund animal welfare programs. His empire of abuse was dismantled brick by brick. And sometimes, late at night, Elias would think about that snowy evening when he'd heard whimpering from a cardboard box and made the choice to care when he had every reason not to. That choice had saved 5 lives. But in saving them, Elias had saved himself. Had remembered that value wasn't something others assigned, it was something you claimed through your actions. Had learned that rock bottom wasn't the end of the story, just a plot point on the way to something better. Grace slept at the foot of his bed, her puppies, now full-grown dogs, placed with families who'd been thoroughly vetted through the program. They visited regularly, a pack reunited. On the coldest nights, when snow fell on Seattle and temperatures dropped, Grace would get anxious. On those nights, Elias would sit with her, remembering the tent, the fear, the moment when a police officer and his dog had chosen to see rather than ignore. He'd touch Grace's head and whisper the same words he'd said in that tent. "I've got you. I promise." And this time he kept that promise. Every single day. Because some promises were worth keeping no matter what it cost. And some lives were worth saving even when, especially when, the world said they didn't matter.